I fought for God. Who do you fight for, Exile?
Hey there, welcome to another Path of Exile build guide. With so many changes to Path of Exile in the past year and such a large number of new tools available for designing builds, it was high time I revisited one of the most fun to play builds out there. The new Cyclone Champion build is better than the previous version both offensively and defensively, while still being incredibly easy to play and highly efficient on low budgets. A great league starter, it performs really well with makeshift gear and cheap uniques all the way to mid-tier maps without investing more than a few chaos orbs for each piece. It also scales really well with better gear, so the more currency you're willing to spend, the better it performs. This makes it ideal for a long-term build that you can really pimp out over the course of an entire league or in standard mode. It can run any of the existing content in the game, including Awakening 8 Cirrus or Uber Elder, and it's equally efficient at killing bosses and Atlas farming. While I wouldn't recommend it for hardcore play, its survivability scales with your own skills, as proper positioning and maneuvering while spinning can help you survive encounters that would immediately kill other builds. As for mapping, the only mode you cannot run is Physical Damage Reflect. No Leech and Monsters Cannot Be Taunted are two other modes you should avoid, as they cripple the build quite significantly. Last but definitely not least, the build is incredibly fun to play. If you've ever played Whirlwind Barb in Diablo games, you'll know exactly what I mean. Dashing in the middle of a pack and shredding everything to pieces is just extremely satisfying. Before diving into how you actually get to play the build and put together all its pieces, I should add a short disclaimer. This guide will be more condensed than my previous ones, however pretty much all the usual information is still there, it's just presented in a more compact format. If anything is unclear or you have any questions about the build, you can find me streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/Navandis, link to the schedule in the pinned comment and video description. I'm live 4 or 5 times a week and you'll get to see every upcoming build being put together, leveled up and fine-tuned before it becomes a guide such as this one. Finally, the most up-to-date path of building link will also be found in the pinned comment and video description. As usual, the guide is still divided into 7 main sections: Build Overview, Passive Tree and Leveling, Ascendancy, Pantheon, Gems and Links, Gear, Flasks and Jewels, and finally Pros and Cons. So with that out of the way, let's start with the build overview. The build revolves around Cyclone, a channeling skill which deals weapon damage in a large area around your character for as long as you keep the button pressed. You can move around while spinning, allowing you to reposition, get out of harmful stuff lying on the ground or dodge incoming attacks, all while continuing to deal damage to enemies. This means you'll have very little DPS downtime in any fight, and the same goes for leeching back life. As you keep channeling, Cyclone gains additional stages, up to 6 at level 20, each of them increasing the size of its area of effect. Apart from this mechanic, your melee strike range also dictates how large this area will end up being. While there are many ways to use Cyclone, this particular build focuses on two-handed swords and physical damage. You won't be dealing any elemental or chaos damage, so gearing will be really straightforward. It's also a critical strike type of build, and with decent equipment you'll end up with over 70% crit chance. Topping everything off is the powerful Impale mechanic, a huge DPS boost for physical damage builds. On every target hit with an attack, you'll create one Impale stack, up to a maximum of 7 with the Champion Ascendancy. Each Impale stack stores 10% of the physical damage dealt with that hit and is afterwards released with subsequent hits. You can think of it as a dot that ticks only when you hit that monster after it was applied. I know this is a rather confusing mechanic, so I won't bore you with all the math behind it and the exact interactions. I will however say it's a huge DPS boost against any enemy that takes more than 2 or 3 hits to die, so it's especially efficient against bosses. On top of that, the build makes use of Hemophilia gloves, which cause bleeding enemies to explode and deal physical damage in an area around them, greatly increasing your map clearing efficiency. As for defenses, you'll rely on endurance charges, permanent fortify buff, huge amounts of armor, a great deal of life leeching, and even positive chaos resistance. While it sounds like a lot to take in, don't worry, as always I'll talk about all these in much greater detail in the passives, gems and gearing sections respectively. And speaking of that, let's actually start with the passive tree and leveling. You start off as a duelist and up to level 28 when you can use Cyclone, go with Cleave, Lacerate, Sweep or any other physical damage melee skill. The first 3 acts are packed with excellent passives to kick things off. Master of the Arena, Art of the Gladiator and Destroyer will provide a great deal of attack speed, accuracy and melee physical damage, as well as some dex to help you level up your green gems. Bravery and Golem's Blood boost your HP, evasion rating as well as life regen to ensure you survive your first few boss fights. Afterwards, grab Swift's Curing Wheel to start applying Impale stacks. You also need to build up a decent chance to cause bleeding with your attacks for Hemophilia gloves to work properly. Bloodletting Wheel is the first step towards achieving that goal. Brinkmanship Cluster increases your area of effect and Blade of Cunning is one of the strongest critical strike nodes for swords. Top everything off with Soul of Steel for a large amount of armor and elemental resistances. The second act also brings with it the Deal with the Bandits quest, and the best option here is to help Alira. Pretty much all her bonuses are useful for this build. Critical strike multiplier, mana regeneration, as well as a decent amount of elemental resistances. These will make both leveling and endgame gearing much easier. In the next 3 acts, continue using your points in the left part of the passive tree. First, get the entire Bloodless Wheel for a solid chunk of HP and then pick up Call to Arms Keystone. This passive will make your Enduring Cry an instant cast, meaning you can just spam it on cooldown without interrupting your cycloning or movement. I'll talk more about this in the gem section, but make sure you start using Enduring Cry as soon as you take this Keystone. It's a huge survivability tool in your arsenal, one that will keep you alive numerous times. Follow up with Blade Master and Razor's Edge, which make up a very strong DPS cluster. These will increase pretty much all the offensive stats related to swords, such as attack speed and physical damage, but also including extra chance to cause bleeding. Needless to say, you'll need to use a sword to actually benefit from these bonuses. Finally, Juggernaut and Barbarism will further increase your life and armor, helping you survive the harder fights in the second part of the campaign. Up to Act 9, focus more on damage with Disemboweling, Dismembering and Rampart Wheels. The first 2 greatly improve your chance to crit and crit multiplier, while the last one provides extra bonuses as long as your Fortify buff is up. If you're not yet using Fortify in your Cyclone setup, postpone spending points on Rampart Wheel until you do. Balance these out with a Jewel Socket and Tireless Wheel. This not only increases your HP quite a bit, but also lowers the cost of all your skills, making mana sustain much more manageable. As you finish story mode and up to level 80, defenses become somewhat more important, so Warrior's Blood, Heart of the Warrior and Constitution are excellent picks to make sure you stay alive. On the way you can pick up a second Jewel Socket, then grab Born to Fight and Versatility for some attack speed, increased physical damage as well as dex and intelligence. These attributes are very much needed for leveling up your green and blue gems. In this Jewel Socket, you should ideally place a Glorious Vanity Jewel, converting the nearby keystone, the Agnostic, into Immortal Ambition. That new keystone will prevent your life leech effects from ending when your HP is full, being one of the strongest defensive mechanisms in the game for melee builds. I will however talk more about this in the gearing section. By level 90, you should have enough points to grab these increased life and armor passives, as well as Wrecking Ball for some additional physical damage and attack speed. From this point up to level 100, the most balanced approach is to get 2 additional Jewel Sockets and then Kinetic Impacts Wheel if you're willing to push that far. Jewels provide some much needed flexibility in endgame, whether to help you cap your resistances or get enough attributes to level up off-color gems. And that's about it for the passive tree and leveling. In the next section I'll be covering the Ascendancy class, which improves pretty much every single aspect of this build. As you've likely figured out from the title, the Ascendancy of choice for this build is the Versatile Champion. It has a perfect balance of offense and defense without any major weaknesses. First points go into Conqueror, a passive that is not spectacular on its own but sets the stage for the following one. It grants a 100% chance to taunt on hit while greatly reducing incoming damage and providing a solid chunk of life regen. After completing Crew Labyrinth, follow up with Worthy Foe. Taunted enemies take significantly more damage and, most importantly, cannot evade your attacks. This practically translates into 100% chance to hit without having to invest anything into accuracy. It saves a huge amount of passives and gear affixes, which can instead be used for other pure DPS mods. And by the way, you don't necessarily need to hit enemies to taunt them. Enduring Cry will also taunt all nearby enemies and it has quite a large area of effect as well. Third in line is Master of Metal, a passive which focuses on Impale. You get 20% chance to impale on hit, 2 extra impale stacks on each enemy, as well as increased physical damage for each impale stack. It's a huge damage increase and one of the main reasons for picking Champion as the Ascendancy class. Finally, with your last Ascendancy points, take Unstoppable Hero, an amazing passive with a lot of useful benefits. They all revolve around having the Fortify buff active, which is also why you'll be using Fortify support in the main skill setup. With this passive and Fortify buff up, you get a whole bunch of extra damage, attack speed, armor and evasion, and most importantly, stun immunity. In endgame, stuns are a major death cause, especially for melee builds, so having complete immunity to it will greatly boost your survivability. With the Ascendancy out of the way, we can take a quick look at the Pantheon choices. Generally speaking, Pantheon choices are situational and there isn't a best pair that will outperform all others in any situation. However, there are certain options that complement specific builds quite well in a wide range of scenarios. For this particular case, here are my recommendations. For the Major God, Soul of Arakali. Damage over time is a weak spot for this build, so getting some defenses against it is always a good idea. On top of that, it reduces Shock's duration and effectiveness, which is one of the most dangerous ailments out there. Any additional way to shave off extra damage you receive is more than welcome. As for the Minor God, the optimal choice is likely Soul of Grathkul. Since you're operating in melee range and taunting everything around you, you'll receive a significant amount of hits. Reducing enemies' attack speed as well as incoming physical damage will give you some more breathing room. Having covered the Pantheon choices, we can now focus on one of the most important aspects of any build, gems and links. As usual, I'll start off with the main skill, Cyclone and its support gems. If possible, try to get a level 21 Cyclone through corruption, as it then gains one extra stage, increasing both its area of effect and damage. First in line is Impale support. This will increase your chance to impale enemies and also buff the damage done through this mechanic. As I mentioned in the build overview section, Impale adds an insane amount of damage against any target that survives more than 2 or 3 hits. Next you have Brutality, which adds an insane amount of pure physical damage, pretty much the highest a support gem can provide. However, it also prevents you from dealing any elemental or chaos damage with Cyclone. As the build is focusing strictly on fizz damage, this downside is negligible. In fact, it's actually a benefit as you'll technically become immune to reflected elemental damage. Next gem is Fortify support. While it's not the greatest damage support out there, it will guarantee an almost permanent uptime for the Fortify buff. This in turn significantly reduces damage you take from hits. It also enables the Unstoppable Hero Ascendancy passive, so it's pretty much a must-have in this build. Then there's Infused Channeling, and as you probably suspect, these two boost your physical damage. But on top of that, a short time after channeling Cyclone, you'll receive the Infusion buff, which lasts 6 seconds and further boosts your physical damage. While channeling, you also get a very strong physical damage reduction buff, greatly improving your defenses. And the last gem in this setup is Pulverize. Apart from more physical damage, it also increases Cyclone's area of effect, making it far more efficient for map clearing. Again, not the best DPS gem out there, but definitely makes up for it in usefulness. Since this build uses a two-handed sword, you potentially get the benefit of a second 6-link setup. Now, it's not absolutely mandatory that all 6 gems are linked, and if you can only afford the 5-link, that's totally fine. It's more of a min-maxing thing, so don't go out of your way to link the last gem as well. First we have Pride, an aura that increases physical damage taken by your enemies the longer they stay in its radius. Then there's Blood and Sand, along with its twin aura Flesh and Stone. These auras have 2 modes or stances, Blood and Sand, and you can toggle between them by simply pressing the skill button again. Sand stance is a defensive option, while Blood focuses more on dealing extra damage. I very rarely use Sand stance as the build is already tanky enough and killing stuff faster is a sort of defensive layer in itself. You then link these with Maim support, which might seem like a strange choice here. However, in Blood stance, Flesh and Stone aura will maim nearby enemies, and the support gem says enemies maimed by supported skills take increased physical damage. While it does increase the mana reservation cost, it also greatly buffs your DPS. Fifth gem in this setup is Enlighten support of at least level 2, but ideally level 3 or 4 to reduce the mana reservation cost of your auras. The more auras you link with this support, the greater its benefit. Finally, last gem in this setup is Dread Banner, increasing your chance to impale with attacks as well as impale damage, while at the same time reducing your enemy's accuracy. While you could plant the banner in the ground to temporarily boost its effectiveness, the damage increase is marginal, so I wouldn't really bother with that. Just use it as a regular aura and let it do its thing. Up next, you have an Ancestral Warchief setup. This skill summons a totem which attacks nearby enemies, but more importantly, increases your melee damage while standing near it. As the totem is stuck in place, it's only meant to be used in fixed combat scenarios where you need any extra damage you can get, boss fights, delve nodes, legion encounters, etc. Since the Warchief also deals physical damage, it's linked with Brutality, Impale and Culling Strike. The first two gems simply increase its overall DPS, while the last support makes it that any hit from your totem will instantly kill targets that are at or below 10% life. And yes, that applies to bosses as well, and your totem can instantly kill Cirrus or Shaper if they're under 10% life. Next setup is your utility toolbox. First is Dash, the build's mobility skill. There's nothing much to say about it apart from the fact that it's really quick, is not impacted by slow effects, and it can bypass obstacles. This makes it ideal not only as a travel skill but also as a defensive tool for dodging big incoming damage as well as getting out of nasty ground effects. You then have Molten Shell, a guard skill that creates a damage absorption shield based off how much armor you have. It will soak up anywhere between 2000 and 5000 damage when you have all the extra armor from your Ascendancy passives and Granite Flask. Next gem is Enduring Cry, a warcry which generates endurance charges, boosts your defenses and provides a huge life regen burst. Both Molten Shell and Enduring Cry are instant, so they can be cast while you're cycloning. Finally, link all these with Second Wind. This really useful support will lower the cooldown of all 3 active skills and provide an additional charge to dash. The last gem setup is a custom damage taken one. This trigger gem will cast any linked active skills after you take a certain amount of damage. A higher custom damage taken gem will be able to cast higher level linked gems, but it would also require a lot more damage to be triggered. As such, for this particular build, I suggest keeping the trigger gem at level 5 so it triggers more often. Then add a level 8 Assassin's Mark gem. This curse will increase both the critical strike chance and damage against marked targets and has a chance to generate a power charge on kill. In turn, power charges further increase your overall critical strike chance. Third gem in this setup, Blood Rage, doesn't even have to be linked with the other gems. It provides a buff that greatly increases your attack speed as well as giving you a 25% chance to gain a Frenzy Charge on kill. Frenzy Charges will further increase your attack speed and damage. While it does apply a damage over time debuff on yourself, it's completely offset by your Life Leech and Life Regen. And the last gem is completely optional. You can go with an Ice Golem for some extra DPS, a Stone Golem for additional life regen, or a level 1 Precision Aura if your mana pool allows it. With the gems out of the way, it's time to take a look at the recommended gear for this build. In this section, for each gear slot I will outline 3 tiers: basic, mid tier and best in slot. Generally speaking, prices increase significantly with each tier, but so do the benefits that the items bring. Your main goal is to cap your elemental resistances, and then you should aim to have either flat or increased maximum life on all gear pieces except on your weapon. Next priority is to gather enough intelligence and dexterity to level up your blue and green gems. It's not a huge issue if you can't max out these off-color gems such as Dash or Blood Rage, but do your best to get the necessary attributes. The rest of the affixes should be a mix of chaos resistance and damage ones, mostly in the form of flat physical damage, crit strike chance and multiplier, and attack speed. Starting from the top, a good basic tier helmet has 60 plus elemental resistances and maximum life, some chaos resistance or attributes such as dex or int, ideally on an armor base. A good mid tier one is the often overlooked Crown of the Inward Eye. It provides a very large amount of life and armor, as well as some decent damage thanks to Transfiguration of Body. This passive translates to increases and reductions to maximum life, also apply to attack damage at 30% of their value. Finally, for best in slot, you've got the high risk, high reward Abysses. It comes with a massive amount of flat physical damage as well as crit multiplier, 2 mods which aren't normally found on this gear slot. A huge amount of armor as well as 20 plus all attributes further increase the value of this item. However, all these come at a cost, 40 to 50% increased physical damage taken. For most builds this would be fatal, but with endurance charges and a huge amount of armor, you'll actually still be incredibly tanky and won't really feel this penalty. Moving on to your weapon, you'll be using a two-handed sword, and a great basic tier 1 is Terminus Est. It's always dirt cheap and has really good DPS for an entry level weapon. On top of that, it helps with mana sustain and frenzy charges generation, some really handy bonuses for early stages of Atlas farming. For mid tier, the unique Starforge is an excellent option with solid physical damage, increased area of effect and even some maximum life. On top of that, it allows your physical damage to shock, further increasing the damage taken by your enemies. While it has been somewhat nerfed in Harvest League, it's still a great weapon for its price. Finally, for best in slot, you should aim for a rare one with 600 plus physical DPS, crit strike chance and crit multiplier, as well as some attack speed. It should ideally be an exquisite blade for the massive crit multiplier implicit. Up next is the body armor, and this is mostly a defensive slot. At basic tier you need at least 5 links, 70 plus life and 70 plus elemental resistances. Some extra chaos resistance or dexterity would also be a great bonus. For mid tier you should already aim for 6 links, and the best candidates are 2 unique armors. Belly of the Beast is a defense oriented one, providing large amounts of life and resistances. The other option is Carcass Jack, which greatly boosts Cyclone's area of effect and area damage. As for best in slot, you're looking for an Elder influenced one with 90 plus life, 70 plus resistances, and attacks have plus percentage to critical strike chance. While that crit chance bonus might seem really low, it's in fact added to your base crit, which is what gets multiplied afterwards with all those percentage increased crit chance passives and affixes. If there's an empty prefix, then you should craft chance to avoid elemental ailments or percentage increased maximum life using your hideout's crafting bench. With gloves, I believe a pair of Hemophilias is the absolute best choice here. Cyclone's radius can no longer be easily increased, or at the very least not without investing a large number of passives and gear affixes. Instead, we'll use these gloves to greatly boost the build's mass clearing potential. Bleeding enemies you kill explode, dealing 5% of their maximum life as physical damage is the key to making that happen. This bonus scales with all your increased physical damage sources, so it can insta-kill large packs even after a single enemy dies. They're always cheap and in abundance, and you can use them from level 43. As for mid tier and best in slot, a pair of corrupted Hemophilia with attacks have plus percentage to critical strike chance are your best bet. Similar to the affix I mentioned earlier on body armors, this bonus is added to your base crit chance, so it's a really solid DPS boost. Moving on to boots, an excellent pair of basic ones are the unique Red Blade Tramplers. Movement speed, some life, a bit of resistance and solid amount of armor. But the real selling point is the added flat physical damage, an affix that is not normally found on boots. Mid-tier ones should have at least 25% movement speed, 70 plus life and 80 plus resistances. An armor or hybrid armor plus evasion base is ideal. Finally, best in slot boots need pretty much the same affixes but with higher numeric values, and ideally 40 plus dex to gather enough for your green gems such as Blood Rage or Dash. Up next is your belt slot, and for basic and mid tier it should have about 90 plus life, 70 plus elemental resistances, perhaps some chaos resistance as well. A rustic sash base is ideal for its increased physical damage implicit. For best in slot, replace the base with a Stygian Vice for the extra jewel socket. If your elemental resistances are already capped, then look for some chaos resistance instead, as well as some flask related affixes. The Amulet is a versatile slot in this build, and it should be used to squeeze out as much damage as possible while having just enough resistances to be capped. A fairly good basic amulet is Daresur's Salute. It provides a decent amount of resistances, plus 2 melee strike range, as well as increased damage and movement speed while on full life. On mid tier and best in slot amulets, a crucial prefix is channeling skills have minus mana cost. Between amulet and rings, you'll need the minus mana cost prefix on 2 of these accessories. This will get your Cyclone to only cost 1 or 2 mana points, allowing you to channel it permanently without needing a mana flask. This mod is crafted using your hideout bench and is unlocked by unveiling jewelry dropped by Elrion in Syndicate encounters. In addition to that, look for flat physical damage, critical strike chance and multiplier, a good amount of life, and ideally some intelligence or dex. A turquoise amulet base would be perfect for its int and dex implicit. Amulets can also be anointed using oils dropped from blight encounters to add a notable passive to them without changing the item in any other way. For this particular build, the best DPS option is Fatal Blade. A close second and slightly cheaper one is Titanic Impacts. For pure defense, something like Cruel Preparation is a top choice, but that should be necessary only if you're playing hardcore. With rings, it's the same story as with the amulet. Get as much DPS as possible while using just enough affixes for capping your resistances. Then, regardless of tier, the priority is still getting a total of 2 channeling skills have minus mana cost prefixes between your rings and amulet. Besides that, on basic ones look for 40 plus maximum life, just enough resistances to be capped, along with some flat physical damage. Mid tier and best in slot ones should have pretty much the same affixes, just higher numeric values, as well as some critical strike chance. If you can afford it, look for some extra chaos resistance, dex or int. While in the past chaos resistance was more of a luxury thing to have, nowadays the game throws more and more chaos damage at you, so it becomes rather important to mitigate some of that. Up next are jewels, an excellent source of DPS, life and utility. They really add up, so don't ignore or downplay their importance. The absolute top priority here is to get an Abyss Jewel with chance to blind on hit. Blinded enemies have a high chance of missing their attacks, effectively boosting your defenses by a large margin. Apart from that, on rare jewels you're looking for maximum or flat life, flat physical damage, critical strike chance and multiplier, or attack speed. The damage modes can come in a variety of formats, regular, with swords, with two-handed weapons, etc. I can't list them all here, but you can find trade links in the notes tab of the Path of Building guide. Then I absolutely recommend getting a Glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel with the flavor text sacrificed in the name of Ahuana. You need to place this in the jewel socket right next to the agnostic keystone. Timeless jewels modify or corrupt all the passive nodes in their radius, and the flavor text indicates which passive a keystone in that radius will transform into. In this particular case, the agnostic will be converted into Immortal Ambition. All life leech normally ends as soon as your HP is full. Even if you had a huge amount of ongoing leech, the instant your life is full, it's all gone. Immortal Ambition Keystone will prevent that from happening, and life leeching will continue even after your HP is at 100%. In practice, this translates into a lot of buffered up life leech, which will go into effect as soon as your life drops again. It's a sort of standby heal over time, which will greatly increase your survivability. As this is a build that relies quite a bit on leeching, I can't stress enough just how important and strong this item is. Finally, there are two unique jewels which, although really expensive, will really push your DPS to the next level. Transcendent Flesh, which needs to be socketed right above Juggernaut passive, and a Watcher's Eye with at least one Pride Aura affix. Moving on to Flasks, these are quite an important component of this build and they will greatly boost your overall damage. First, you need a Seeding Divine Life Flask of Staunching. Instant healing is a real lifesaver and bleeding removal is absolutely mandatory while mapping. Then, since this is a crit build, an Experimenter Diamond Flask is a must-have. Lucky crit chance means the game will roll twice to determine if a hit is a crit and then applies the best result. In practice, this means you get a much higher effective crit chance while the flask is active, so make sure you use it constantly. The suffix should be of heat for chill and freeze immunity. Third flask is a Chemist's Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline. While spinning, your movement speed is reduced, so using a Quicksilver Flask will alleviate that to some extent. Fourth one is Lion's Roar Unique Flask. This grants you a huge amount of physical damage, so it fits perfectly with the build. Finally, the last flask is more flexible, but my general recommendation is a Chemist's Silver Flask for the Onslaught buff, increasing your attack and movement speed. The suffix is of warding for curse immunity. Curses are encountered really often while mapping and they can be fairly crippling, greatly reducing your defenses or damage output. To wrap up the gearing section, here are some excellent leveling uniques which will help you easily progress to the campaign. With the gearing out of the way, it is time to take a final look at the pros and cons of the build so you can better understand if it's what you're looking for. Starting off with the pros, a really mobile and fast-paced build, one of the very few where you're constantly dealing damage while moving. Excellent clearing speed, the build is very efficient at quickly killing large packs of mobs without any downtime. Very easy to play without complicated mechanics or complex gearing, definitely beginner friendly. Really fun build, with all the various changes to melee combat, this build just feels great. Efficiency scales with player skill. Careful maneuvering while cycloning can help you survive encounters that would otherwise kill you. Getting more familiar with the build and its playstyle is rewarded with overall better performance. Each gear upgrade will be a significant buff, generally proportional with the investment. As such, it has a very high performance ceiling and the build is great for a long-term project. It will take a long time to reach a point where you feel you're no longer progressing. As for the cons, it is a melee build. This means you'll be in the thick of things most of the time, more vulnerable than a ranged character. You're spinning quite a lot. This might not bother most players, but some can find it tiring or even nauseating. Cannot run all map modes. Physical reflect maps will get you killed very quickly and no leech ones are pretty dangerous as you rely on life leech for a large portion of your overall defense.
Learn anything new, Exile?
If you did, then you'll probably be happy to hear there are more videos coming up in the near future with more exciting builds to try. Make sure not to miss them by subscribing to the channel so you get notified when that happens. And while you're at it, why not like this video as well or drop a comment down below to let me know your thoughts. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.